Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. This is Eileen Frazer, retiring executive of CAMTS. I am often referred to as the founder, so I would like to provide a brief history of how and why we got started. And more importantly, I would like to honor the many peers who have supported CAMTS to make it the successful organization it is today. From a historical perspective, I was a chief flight nurse in 1981 at a level 1 trauma center. We were the 13th hospital-based service in the US. There were no standards or policies to copy or recreate, and organizations such as Ashbeams and NIFPA were also just getting started. In 1982, we had a fatal accident. The pilot was my husband's best friend, the nurse was my nursing school classmate, and the young paramedic and patient were all fatalities. Rick and I felt we had to find out exactly what happened. We interviewed the EMS people on the scene, and they told us that the patient was very disorderly and combative when they loaded him into the BL 105. We felt that perhaps what happened, the patient got an arm free, and pushed the medic into the pilot and controls. They crashed shortly after takeoff. Remember, this is 1982. There were no policies about combative patients and no chemical restraints that were available as they are today. In fact, 1980 saw the highest number of accidents of any decade as the number of hospital-based services kept climbing as well. As I said, Medevac was the 13th program. There were 200 by 1990. Rick and I would drive to DC every other month to look through miles of microfiche to see what we could learn from accidents that were happening. We also petitioned the helicopter manufacturers, MBB and Bell at that time, to put a barrier between the pilot and controls and patient. The graph here is one of the several presentations and published studies we did throughout the 1980s through Ashbeams. 1986, Mr. Jim Smith, president of Ashbeams at the time, suggested that the organization develop a Priority 1 safety audit. I was the safety committee chair of Ashbeams at the time. Our committee developed some checklists and guidelines, and we went out and did some beta test sites at Staff for Life in Columbia, Missouri, Duke Life Flight in Durham, and Life Flight in San Diego. As a result of these test sites, we learned that not only was safety at risk, but also patient care, since most of the protocols were followed were hospital protocols and not pertinent to transport. As a result, I completed a feasibility study in 1988, where I met with several organizations, including JCO, who had no interest in taking part in accreditation of transport, not at that time anyway. I presented my results of the feasibility study to the AIMS membership meeting in October 1989, and they voted to loan $78,000 to start up a new nonprofit organization for accreditation. Dr. Frank Thomas, president of AIMS at the time, stipulated that this organization should be totally separate and not managed by AIMS, but consist of professional member organizations. That $78,000 last. There were no grants available at the time. We did receive a $3,000 anonymous donation, as well as $500 from Aerospatiale and $500 from Baker Audio. By 1991, we had 2 applicants. By 92, there were 3. By 94, there were 12 accredited, and it was a slow start. By 2000, we had 77 accredited. The first board meeting for the Commission on Accreditation of Air Medical Services, CAMS, was held July 13, 1990. 7 organizations were represented as follows, and I was also hired as the executive director at that meeting. Dr. Nick Benson from Greenville, North Carolina, and the ACEP representative was elected as the chair at that first meeting. Carl Gills, pictured here with Nick, was elected as vice chair. Carl was the Ames representative at that time. The first year, we were very busy creating bylaws and articles of incorporation in Pennsylvania, where I was still living. Karen Johnson was the first NIFNA representative and first secretary on the executive board. She was instrumental in developing the first site surveyor training, which we completed in 1991, as soon as the first edition standards were published. In 2003, Karen was hired as the site surveyor coordinator. In that role, she contacted programs, set up dates, and potential site surveyors to schedule the actual site visits. Karen remained an active part of CAMTS activities throughout the years. I found this picture of a board meeting in 1991 with notable guests. From left to right, Dr. Bob Bass from MIMS in Maryland, Jane Wynn from Lifelight in Dallas. Connie Schneider Eastley is next, and she's also from Ames, as was Jane Wynn. Peggy Calhoun was in our first site surveyor class. She dedicated untold hours to helping us create fixed wing standards, which very few of us, had any knowledge of it at that time. Roseanne Krantz is from the Life Flight program in Fargo, North Dakota. She was the first one to apply for accreditation for her program, and they were the first to be accredited in 1991. Dr. Rick Hunt Seated was on the board representing NAEMSP. He's still very much in contact with us. By the way, the acronym PIF, Program Information Form, came from Rick, who was at that time also involved in accreditation for residency programs, and that's where that term came from. Dick Gore, we'll hear more about later in this presentation, was the representative from the American Academy of Pediatrics, had been from 1991 to 2024. Mary Booser Gills was the chair from 1995 to 1997. Mary met and married Carl Gills, who was on the initial Ames representative to CAMTS, and both were on the board at the time. Mary represented NAN, and it was her group who strongly urged us to include ground transports in our standards, since many neonatal teams primarily transported by ground, and they felt accreditation would be very important. In 1997, that led to us adding ground and our name change to the Commission on Accreditation of Medical Transport Systems. In 2000, we fully repaid the Ames loan with interest. Dr. Dan Hankins, pictured here with Dudley and me, is tearing up the loan papers. He was on our board since 1992. He was from Rochester, Minnesota, as the medical director of Mayo Transport, and he was very active as a chair from 1997 to 2000, even taking part in our site surveyor training classes. Dr. Ralph Rogers became chair in 2000. Ralph represented ACEP, and he was on the board and previously a site surveyor. Ralph brought us into the digital age for submitting application materials. Also, he met and married Karen Johnson, who I spoke about earlier, while both served on the board, and later they brought their daughter Madison to board meetings. She became a familiar and happy visitor. In 2001, we were sued for withdrawing accreditation from a service that had a whistleblower, and we were found to be violating standards and policies of CAMTS. We won the lawsuit after 2 years of depositions and the final hearing This is the forms from the final hearing. And I really put this in here to remind myself that I need to bring back to the office all the original documents that I still have. After 2 years, the lawsuit we won, but our E&O insurance premiums went from $3,000 annually the previous year to $28,000 each year since then. So I'm not sure what we really won. In 2005, I received a phone call from a Dr. John Overton. He explained that he was a retired cardiothoracic surgeon and a private pilot who had been following CAMTS standards and practices and very much wanted to be involved. I called Ralph and I said, we need to have this guy as an ad hoc member on our board, and we did. And his contributions were highly significant. John was responsible for developing the first safety culture survey. He introduced us to Scott Griffin and Just Culture. Several of us became certified in Just Culture. He was managing editor of our textbook Safety and Quality in Medical Transport Systems, and also he was responsible for gathering many of the human factor authors in this book. And his NTSB connection with Robert Sumwalt, the chair, led him to be a medical advisor to the NTS board when he left the CAMTS board. In 2009, we were awarded the FAA Safety Team Award for developing Hazards of Helicopter Shopping DVD. Tammy Chapman was primarily responsible for leading the production of this video at a time when we really needed to educate our constituents and provide ideas about how to handle or deal with helicopter shopping. In 2013, CAMTS was invited to hold its summer meeting in Zurich at Rega headquarters by Stefan Becker, their head of corporate development. Stefan and I often met at HAI meetings, Heli Expos in previous years, and discussed the potential for international CAMTS. In 2015, the entire board and distinguished guests had the opportunity to celebrate the 25th anniversary of CAMTS aboard the Queen Mary in California. In 2015, we registered CAMTS EU in Zurich as a charitable organization offering accreditation to services outside of North America. Stefan was a primary motivator. He was elected as president of CAMTS EU that later became CAMTS Global. In 2016, Swiss Air Rescue Rega achieved full accreditation. 2016 was a sad year for CAMTS. We lost both Ralph Rogers and Suzanne Waddell to cancer. Ralph, pictured here with his daughter Madison, was our highly respected chair at the time and married to Karen, who I spoke about earlier. Suzanne was the beloved medical director of Boston MedFlight. She represented ACCT on our board and was married to Alistair Kahn, our next chair. In 2016, Dr. Alistair Kahn became chair of CAMTS. Alistair is well known as a trauma pioneer and well respected for his leadership at Mass General and Boston MedFlight. He joined the CAMTS board in 2007 after convincing the American College of Surgeons to become a member organization of CAMTS. Alistair not only brought his vast trauma experience, but also his knowledge of the trauma center designation process by the ACS. We were often asked why CAMTS was not accredited. Dudley found ANSI, the American National Standards Institute, and worked tirelessly to achieve ANSI accreditation as a standards developing organization. That was in 2017. In 2020, Dick Orr became chair of the board, representing AAP since 1991. Dick is the longest-serving board member who retired in 2024. He served as vice chair for many years, rarely missed a board meeting, and even regularly attended our staff meetings between board meetings. The years we presented site surveyor classes. We hold them every 2 to 3 years depending on attrition and specific needs. Part of the 3-day training is to present a fictitious program and have applicants interview the managers. John Greinick, pictured here, was on the board, and he was representing the Paramedic Association. And he was playing the program director with his wife, Tina Giangrasso, one of our senior site surveyors, playing her humorous role as the clinical coordinator. We usually had a lot of fun with the interviews to lighten up the dry materials by explaining standards and policies. In the beginning, I wanted to honor many of those who have been dedicated to CAMTS through all the years, especially site surveyors who still are conducting site visits. CAMTS is so fortunate to have many dedicated surveyors who are really the public face to the service we provide. I would like to honor board members who have been with us for 10 years or more, starting with Dr. Renee Holleran in the upper left corner. Renee has been a board member representing ENA since 1997. She's the most dependable board member, repeating board reports every meeting, and she also is the Education Committee Chairman, who reviews the simulation scenarios we receive from programs to meet their clinical experience standards. Renee is also the editor of ASNA publication Patient Transport Principles and Practice, now in its 5th edition. To the right of Renee is Steve Siddig. Steve represents AARC since 2006. He also has served as secretary on the executive board since 2012. Ashley Smith represents NADA since 2010. He serves as treasurer on the executive board since 2013 and also on the CAMTS Global Board. In addition, Ashley chairs the Aviation Advisory Committee since 2023. David Stillmiller, next to him, represents NAEMSP since 2010, and David is a very active board member who also serves on the Policies and Procedure Committee. Stefan Becker of CAMTS Global is on the board since 2012. He regularly attends CAMTS board meetings, chairs the CAMTS Global meetings from wherever he is in the world, and is an avid supporter at international conferences. Denise Treadwell, representing AIMS, serves on the board since 2013, serves on the Standards Committee and the Aviation Advisory Committee as a fixed-wing advisor with her vast experience as a fixed-wing provider both nationally and internationally. Tammy Rush, representing NAN, serves on the board since 2014 and as recording secretary since 2023. Tammy has written and contributed to many AAP publications, which has increased our number of applicants from the specialty transport services. Special note, I would like to mention 2 women who have been instrumental in providing access to other professional organizations outside of CAMTS. Upper picture is Dr. Nadine Levick. She's in the middle of her subcommittee on the Transportation Research Board of the National Academies in DC. She brought CAMTS to join this really prestigious group who look carefully at EMS accidents and safety practices of ground ambulances. Nadine is the physician from Australia who published well-known studies on the safe internal configuration of ground ambulances and contributed to our textbook as well. In the picture below, Terry Palmer, she was responsible for bringing claims closer to the HAI as she served on many of their committees, especially the Helicopter Safety and Training Committee. Her knowledge of simulator training was very significant to our board, where she served from 2010 to 2024 as the aviation advisor and was also chair of the PR committee. Terry is also well published in many aviation periodicals. Lastly, I would like to mention 4 people who have been invaluable to CAMTS. Upper left corner, Dudley Smith, as you can see, was a site surveyor, then he was a board member representing Ames, then he was associate executive director, still is, and also runs the standards committee and MIH. Dudley's a very busy guy. He will never let me forget that I sent him to Fargo, North Dakota in February to do the very first site visit. It was quite cold. Next to Dudley is Patty Corbett. Patty has served as a site surveyor. She was in the first site surveyor class. She served as associate executive director for a number of years. She served on the board as the ASNA representative, and again, she serves as coordinating and conducting site visits. Stefan Becker in the lower left corner, again, he's our co-founder of CAMTS Global and is on the executive board of CAMTS. Stefan is invaluable as a representative to the international community. And then Dick Orr, as we mentioned, was our longest serving and most dedicated board member from 1991 to 2024. He's a devoted friend of CAMTS. And last but not least is the staff. This is the staff of CAMTS, starting with Dudley. He's been our associate director since 2012. Jan has been our associate director of clinical since 2017, previously a site surveyor, and the new executive director. Congratulations, Jan. To the right of her is Gigi. Sorry she's embedded because she wasn't at this meeting. She's the executive's assistant since 2013, responsible for scheduling all the site visits, and we do 60 to 70 each year. She calls it her puzzles, getting all the schedules together. Shelley Dixon, now Shelley Mahaffey, has been the office manager since 2004. She manages all the applications, reapplications, memberships, the online PIF that we have. She's also the bookkeeper. As you can see, this is the dedicated staff that really makes CAMTS the success it is today. As I said from the beginning, it's really a team effort. I hope you enjoyed this brief walk down CAMTS memory lane with me. Thank you for looking and listening. This is Eileen Frazer, retired executive director. Thank you.